Welcome back, everyone. So I'll be the chair for this session. And the first presenter is Pablo Mendoza, who is a PhD student at UNAM in Mexico. And he's going to talk about the theory of musical genre.
Good morning. I'm going to talk about musical genre. When we talk about music, we're talking about categories. Categories are necessary to communicate ourselves. We use it for all concepts, and music is not an exception. And one of the most common categories we use is the genre. So, the first question would be, what is genre? Theories have tried to define genre in many ways. For example, Swales says that a genre comprises a class of communicative events, the members of which share some set of communicative purposes. If we take this to music, we can say that the musical genre is a category that groups musical entities or events, such as musical works, which share one or several criteria of social compatibility, contextual affinity, and symbolic truth of aesthetic nature. So, genre creates meaning in communication. It guides toward attitudes, conjectures, and expectations around the cultural artifact or the musical factors, social phenomena. But still, we can think in categories in different ways. For example, cognitive theorists have treated categories by different definitions. These theorists, such as Roche or Lakoff, have made a distinction between what they call classical and cognitive categories. Classical categories are defined by the properties shared by all the members, while the prototype-based categories are defined by cognitive models. Here the question would be, is musical genre a classical category, or is it a cognitive category? Well, I claim that this question would be misleading the real subject, because both types of categories operate at different levels. What we need to do to understand the full complexity of musical genre is to understand how these types of categories operate in different stages or different moments. So, in the scientific literature, researchers have treated terms such as class or category as if they were the same, but it's really the difference in these two terms what can make us understand what is a classical category and what would be a cognitive category. When we talk about classification, the groups work as closed definitions. That's what we call classes, and they work as sets. They have necessary and sufficient conditions of membership. So something is part of some class if it has that membership properties. If it doesn't have them, it's not part. Classes are organized in taxonomies, and they are structured through a stable conceptual system. This conceptual system establishes what are the properties necessary to fulfill the membership to the class. So they work independently of the context is, it is a question of pure logic. They can be explained with set theory. Although some classes have fuzzy borders, they also can be explained through fuzzy set theory, such as the theory of Lafti-Zadek. On the other hand, categorization, when we talk more of cognitive categories, the groups work with open definitions. They do not work as sets. They depend on cognitive capacities such as perception, memory, imagination, or intuition. So these categories, they don't have established limits. Although they have fuzzy limits, they can't be treated as sets because these categories will vary with the difference in context. These categories are created depending on the context and cognitive capacities in multiple conceptual systems. So everybody has different context, external and internal context, to decide what is part of a category. Then the category membership is a judgment according to a degree of typicality with respect to the prototype. According to Roche, a prototype of the category is like an abstract entity that's like that would have the full membership of the category, and we decide according to a judgment of a degree of typicality if it is part or not of the category. So how does this work in genre? As classes, genres have definitions according to the conceptual systems that structure the musical taxonomy under which they operate. The membership of a musical event in a genre depends on the conceptual model that establishes definition. Music is an open concept, so genres have fuzzy boundaries, but they can be explained through fuzzy set theory. With these conditions, genres can be modeled using artificial intelligence to create automatic classification systems, such as the ones used for music information retrieval. But as a cognitive category, the properties of the musical event depend on cognitive capacities in contexts such as social, historical, emotional, others, and signification. These variables can produce diverse results for the categorization of a same event. If we hear a piece of music, maybe each one of you can think in a different category for that piece. The conceptual models we use to deal with musical experiences determine the categorization process using musical competences and knowledge mediated through culture. As a cognitive category, the genre is projected mainly in the music identification processes, and this has to do with perception, memory, imagination, and intuition. But there's another, they work through family resemblances. So we say that maybe some piece of music is part of a genre because it resembles to another that is also part of the same genre. But there's also another aspect that while we all have cognitive categories, to be meaningful, they need to be socialized. And when socialized, there are created conventions. Fabri, for example, say that musical genres are cultural units, which are types of musical events regulated by semantic codes that associate a plane of expression to a plane of content. And Lopez Cano says that musical genre is the result of signification operations and both intersubjective and contextual negotiations. So to establish a social convention, we need to have agreements on which categorization works, and maybe some categorization doesn't work for a community, so they don't establish conventions. But we can see that social conventions aim to create the conceptual stability that it is necessary for taxonomy formations. Well, the social conventions depend on a context, cultural context that works for a musical community. When these conventions are established, they can produce definitions. So these become musical taxonomies. With these three components, we can finally get a three-phase cycle of the musical genre. When we listen to music or we think of music, we are conceiving a category, a cognitive category. And when we socialize these categories, they produce social conventions. These social conventions lead to definitions that establish taxonomies. And these taxonomies are the information needed to produce further categorization processes. So all the three models of categories operate within the musical genre. As social conventions, genres are born and die, as Fabri says, but as taxonomic classes, they are immanent, and these changes over time are just historical attachments to the definition. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thanks for the talk. Are there any questions?
Hello, thanks for the talk. I wanted to ask about categories. Is a prototype existing, or is it ideal?
It is ideal. When Roche began to experiment with this, she thought that maybe there was like a perfect entity, existing entity that represented the category. But then she discovered that this wasn't possible. So it's like an ideal entity, non-existing, and it's just judgments to that non-existing entity, and that prototype would be different in each context.
So if categories are more broadly defined, how come the classes have some fuzzy aspects?
That's because when we are talking of open concepts, we can't have exactly an exact definition for them. When we ask what is music, we can't have an exact definition to say what is and what is not music. That's a question that has been asked many times and with many fails. So we need to treat music as an open concept with these fuzzy borders that some things may be or may not be music, and so it can be in musical genres.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, maybe it's too difficult to do so, but what kind of piece of advice could you give to someone that is trying to make to make a study, and they need to categorize musicians according to the kind of musical genre they play. How will be the best way to do this?
Okay, well, I think that this cycle can show us what to ask for the genre in different stages. When we are categorizing, we can take advantage of the prototype theory, for example. But when we need to ask for social conventions of a genre, well, we need to think in that semiotic codes that are applying to a musical community. So we have to research first what are the context of the community, which is the context of the community, how the conventions have been created and changed over time, who use them and in which way, and then we can know how the genre operates within the community. When we are just trying to define genres, the best thing we can do is not to ask if this is right or this is wrong in a genre, because it's a closed definition. It works independent of the context. So I think for the question you have, maybe the best way to look at is the genre as a social convention.
There is another question, I believe. At the door. Sorry.
Thank you for your talk. I was confused when you equated a cognitive approach to genre with a prototype-based approach, because it seems to me that there are many possible cognitive theories of genre that do not require the existence of prototypes. And certainly when I think about how I perceive genre in a cognitive sense, I'm not thinking about prototypes, at least consciously.
Yes, this doesn't work consciously. It's just like a theoretical explanation of what we do to categorize. Yeah, but it can work to model some artificial intelligence, but it can be more conscious when we are categorizing like not the entities near the prototype, but border entities, the ones we don't know if they belong to the categories or not. So we can think, for example, in fusion music, when it's like two genres and we don't know exactly which one of them, like if this is rock or pop music. So that's when the prototype applies. Is this rock because it resembles more of my idea of rock music, or is it pop because it resembles more to my idea of pop music? That's when it applies more consciously.
Sure.
So that's it. Thank you very much.